Witches, and we are on the second part of Module 2, which is tea blends. For this next exercise, we're going to be making 2 different tea blends. One of the tea blends, it was listed on your PDF file, and it includes chamomile, hibiscus, flower, dried, safflower, and of course you're going to want a sweetener of choice. Usually I would use honey, but I'm out of honey, so I also like to use Splenda, or you might use stevia, something like that. Whatever your preferred sweetener is, if it's sugar, however you like to sweeten your tea, you're going to want to have that too. Now, we also talked about making another tea blend in the last video using our leftover herbs that we ground up. This tea would specifically be good for any kind of calming, menstrual cramps. Chamomile is great to relieve menstrual cramps. I use that all the time. And when Excedrin and ibuprofen don't get the job done, chamomile always does. Now, because of the ingredients of safflower, hibiscus, and chamomile joined together, we could go a couple of different directions with this tea. This tea could be used to attract a lover, because all of those plants have affiliations with love and attraction and bringing things to you. Medicinally, this would be a great tea to take if you were having a cold or a flu or any kind of congestion, and also if you wanted to get your immunities built up, boost your immune system for overall health, or to decrease your glucose levels. This tea would be great for that. Now, one thing I do want to warn, and this is listed on your herbal correspondences sheet, you need to be careful when you are ingesting safflower, because it is not good for people that are pregnant, trying to get pregnant, nursing, trying to conceive, all of those things. So you need to be really cognizant of that and aware of who you're going to be sharing your tea with. I can't stress that enough, that when we're ingesting herbs and we're sharing those with other people, we have a responsibility to find out if those ingredients are toxic or not, and if we're endangering someone else. Other items that you're going to need today is going to be a kettle or a pot that you want to boil your water in. I prefer a good kettle, but it's not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and get mine started to boil as we discuss other things that you're going to need. Other things that you're going to need, we talked about before, tea strainers. This little tea strainer is a popular one that a lot of people use. And you just open up the clamp like this, and then you put your mixture in there, and then you shut it. I do use this one sometimes. I like to use it for bigger herbs that don't fall through the holes. Another one that I like to use, and I like to use this one actually better. This is another one that's pretty popular, is the little dome ball globes. And if you can see, it's all mesh. It's completely comprised of mesh. I like it because it's bigger, I can fit more into it, and it has, the way that it has the clasp down, it goes, there's a peg that goes in that hole, and then this slides down to lock it in place. Sometimes when I use this style of tea strainer, what happens is that I put too much tea in there, or it just, something gets stuck on the rim and it won't close all the way, and I don't realize it, and I put it in my water, and then all these flakes of herbs and flowers and stuff, they fall out into the tea. And so this is my preferred. This one works too. And there's one more way you can strain your tea. The third way that you can strain your tea is by just taking a little piece of cheesecloth, and you would just cut it out, a little swab, a piece of cloth, probably about 5 to 6 inches in diameter. And then you could kind of create like a little sachet with it and tie it up. You could tie it up with twine, macrame, anything really, a brand new hair tie if you wanted to. I think that using a strainer is more convenient, and it's also more waste friendly. So, I mean, how many times are you going to reuse the same little piece of cheesecloth? The propensity and likelihood of you just throwing it out after 1 or 2 uses is higher, whereas if you use a strainer, you're going to continue to use it. It's reusable, longer lifespan, better for the environment, and all in all, better for the earth. So the first thing we will do is we'll go ahead and start our water to boil. If you haven't done that, do that now. Next, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and get your mugs ready. Now that we have our mugs ready and our water is beginning to boil, we can go ahead and start getting our mixes together. Oh, water's done boiling. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the herbs ready to go into the strainer that we're going to use. To pray over your herbs if you're using them for magical purposes. You can even pray over and speak your intentions to your herbs when you're using them for medicinal purposes. Always tell the plant what you're asking from them and what you need from them so that they can be more effective. So I've gathered here a decent little mixture here. This will be definitely enough to make our tea. So because I did make a kind of bigger batch of this, and this is the tea that I want you guys to really focus on because this was our first an intentional recipe, I'm gonna go ahead and use my larger strainer just so that I can be sure to fit as much as possible. And if you noticed, I didn't use as much of the hibiscus as I did some of the other herbs, specifically like safflower or even the chamomile. And the reason being is because hibiscus is pretty strong and it can be overpowering. And if you use too much of it, you might miss out on the notes that come with the other herbs and plants, and we don't want that. We're just gonna open up our strainer and put our herbs in there. You just place them in very nicely. I tend to try to get as much herbs into just one half of the strainer as possible. It just makes it easier and cleaner and reduces the risk of spilling herbs when you close it. And because I didn't really grind these up too much, we won't have too much residue going into the bottom of the teacup. Now you can see there is some powder here, and that's the kind of stuff that's going to fall through the cracks of the strainer. So I'm not gonna worry too much about getting those in there just because I know it's gonna end up at the bottom of my tea mug. Let's clasp. All right. And what I love about this strainer too is it's so cute. It has just a little hook that just hooks onto the side. Now our water is boiled, so we're gonna go ahead and pour this one so it can steep. I just put the tea mixture in there, how dark the water is already getting. And that comes from the hibiscus. That's what I was talking about. It's so strong. Now you can see there are some little pieces of chamomile that are floating out, but it won't really mess anything up. Those are pretty much going to go to the bottom, and it's just like, you know, any time that you're drinking coffee and sometimes you end up with coffee grounds at the bottom. And if you really wanted to, you could not use a strainer if you wanted to do any kind of divination with tea leaves. That's not a form of divination that I use, but it's definitely one that I'd be interested in learning, and if it's something that you use, that would be a great way to follow up with your magical teas. Now that we have our first blend steeping, we can go ahead and begin putting together our second blend, which is the leftover herbs that we used from our incense blend. So it's chamomile and rose and lavender. Now lavender does have I don't want to say an odd taste, but it's definitely an acquired taste. If you've ever tried rose water in your tea mix, it's an acquired taste, and lavender is kind of the same way. And you definitely don't want to use too much lavender, because just like when you add rose water to tea and things like that, it can be overpowering, just like the hibiscus, and it can kind of give it a funky flavor. So you want to have your lavender as just a slight undertone of your tea or any beverage that you're going to be consuming, because it can just taste not super great. It tastes how it smells. And here are the leftover herbs from the blend that we made. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and use this little claspy strainer. So using this is super simple. You're just going to take your herbs, put them on top of your surface, and just sprinkle them in there. And then, like I was saying before, Just be careful on that rim there that you don't get anything stuck in there, because if you do get a stem or something stuck in there, it's going to keep it from closing all the way and you will end up with herbs at the bottom. Another thing that I mentioned to you guys with this one is that you also want to be careful that you don't overload it, and that's for the same reason. If it's not able to fully close and be flush on the sides, then you're going to get some really bad floaters in your tea. So that's a pretty good mixture because we can see that it's sealed all the way. So now we're ready to put that into our tea. With this kind of strainer, you just literally place it in the mug like that, and then you pour your hot water. And you allow that to steep. Remember how dark I showed you that the hibiscus was? See the major difference between the chamomile, the lavender, and the rose versus the hibiscus? Yeah, it's changing colors, but not near as rapidly as the other one. Side by side, here are our tea blends. Our hibiscus safflower blend, and our chamomile, rose, and lavender blend. Now that our tea has sufficiently steeped and it's gotten potency from the herbs that we used, we can add our sweetener in and let it cool to a desired temperature, and then it's good to drink. Another area that we discuss of herbalism in this module is infusions. And infusions are very similar to teas. The difference is that teas typically have a lesser quantity of herbs and a higher quantity of liquid or water, whereas an infusion typically has a higher concentration of herbs and a lower concentration of water. The more herbs that are in the mixture, the more potent it's going to be. So technically, teas are infusions in the same way that rectangles are all squares. But that doesn't mean that every infusion is a tea, just like every square isn't a rectangle. Infusions are defined as a drink or extract prepared by soaking or steeping the leaves of herbs and plants in a liquid. You don't always have to make infusions that are edible for human consumption or even edible at all. One of the infusions that I like to make is an infusion for my chickens. I use astragalus, I use garlic, and I use a little bit of thyme and a little bit of oregano. And it's a natural pesticide that that kills any parasites. So sometimes poultry can be subject to mice and lice and different kinds of worms and stuff like that. And this is just an all-natural way where I can prevent them from getting some of those natural pests and parasites. Another one of my favorite uses for infusions is to make floor washes. And when I say floor wash, I mean what I mop my floor with. So you can always use, Fabuloso, Pine Sol, things like that. And some of those cleansers actually even have magical properties and correspondences and are used in certain magical systems. But one of my favorite things to do is I like to sweep my house from the back to the front. So I sweep out all of the bad and then I sweep it out the front door. And then when I mop from the front of the house to the back. So I'm removing the things I don't want when I sweep, and when I mop, I'm drawing in the things that I do want. And so infusions are a great way to create a floor wash, and you can use all kinds of things. You can, a famous infusion that witches have used for a very long time is mint. You can use mint water on your doors and on your floors, and it's said to protect you, your finances, and help bring in more money. So that's one that you can make. What I like to do with my floor washes is I like to add a little bit of Florida water in them, no matter what the recipe. It makes the water a little bit cloudy, but it's totally fine because what that's going to do is act as a natural preservative. Your floor washes are going to last a lot longer if you add that in there. If you don't add that in there and you just use the herbs and the water and then strain the water, and even if you let it cool before putting it in the fridge, it's going to sour pretty quickly. You're going to have to use it within a matter of 2 days probably. If you add Florida water in, you can probably stretch that out to a couple of weeks, but I would always double check to make sure that they haven't spoiled. You just open them up, smell them, you'll know easily. So I like to add that little bit of Florida water in there for that purpose. And the other reason I add Florida water to my floor washes is because it's also a spiritual cleanser, which I talked to you guys about in the introduction. So it's going to be an added layer of magic that you can add to your cleaning. So you can do muggle cleaning, but you can also do magical cleaning. And I usually like to do a combination of both. I'll do a quick sweep of the house, just a regular muggle sweep, and sweep everything out. And then I'll do my ritual from the back to the front sweeping, and then from the front to the back mopping with a spiritual cleanser. One of my challenges to you guys this week is to be creative and use the Herbal Correspondences sheet and create your own floor wash. If you did invest in the Florida water that I told you about in the introductory, then you can easily add that in. If you didn't, it's okay. You can just always put that in your pocket and save it for later. You can always come back and use that once you've been able to obtain some Florida water. Other things that you can add in floor washes would include essential oils and things like that, but you do want to be very careful that you only use a minimal amount because it will create an oily residue on your floor, make it slippery, shiny, and just gross consistency for your floor. So be careful of that if you decide to go the route of adding essential oils into your floor washes. But floor washes are a great way to use infusions. Another way people use infusions is they make them into sprays that can deter pests and mosquitoes. You could make one with citronella and spray it on you to deter mosquitoes, things like that. There's a lot of different recipes out there. Another thing that I'm going to challenge you to do is to look up some different infusions and see how many different creative ways you can think of using them, and journal about them in your grimoire. And that concludes the second part of Module 2. Now head on over to Module 3, where we're going to do this week in review, and then we're also going to talk about your supply list for week 2, as well as any additional homework assignments.